Hey, thanks for coming. I'm Kevin Slimp, and it's good to be here with you. I used to speak in the church world a lot, but I haven't for a lot of years. I've been speaking at corporate events for the last 20 years or so. And I was thinking about the last big religious conference I spoke at, and I think it was true story. I think it was the International Conference of Religious Communicators. All the major religions of the world get together once every few years, and they meet somewhere around the world. And I was the keynote that year, and I think I was speaking on effective communication. And I'll never forget. I did my thing, and huge audience, and Muslims and Christians, just everybody was there. And I went out in the hallway, and I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but I'll never forget. I went down the hallway, and I had about an hour to kill, and I was going to catch a taxi to the airport because that was in Chicago. I had to speak in Des Moines, Iowa the next day. So I was just going to kill like an hour and then go catch my taxi. And I'll never forget, a man with a turban came up, and he said, "You're Kevin Slimp, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "You're Sikh, aren't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I am. How did you know?" And I said, "Well, the turban and the beard." And he said, "I was sent to meet you." And I said, "Well, I don't remember seeing you in the audience because I didn't remember seeing a turban in the audience." And he said, "Oh, I wasn't in the audience. My flight just got here. I just got to the hotel, and I was sent to meet you." So I said, "Well, did someone from the convention send you over to meet me?" And he said, "You don't understand." He said, "I was sent to meet you." And I said, "How does that work?" Now, by the way, he was the head of the Sikh religion in the Western Hemisphere. It's the 5th biggest religion in the world. And he had an office in Bombay, and he had an office in New York. True story. And he said, "I was in my office a couple of months ago, and a flyer came across my desk, and your picture was on it. And it said you were speaking in Chicago today." And he said, "I knew at that moment I was supposed to meet you." So we talked for a while, and he was a really interesting guy. And he said, "I brought something to you I think I'm supposed to give to you." And it was a manuscript of a book he had just written, a children's book. You remember computer printouts when they were like on, you remember? This was about 10 years ago, I guess. Yeah, Dot Matrix, yes it was. And it was, 500, 600 pages. And he said, I've been traveling the world writing this book. It was a children's book that had the stories from all the different holy books of the major religions. So like David and Goliath was in there. And I read it. It was very interesting. So he gives me the book, and finally I had to go catch the taxi, and I still don't know why I'm telling you this story, but I had to go catch my taxi, and it was a huge hotel in Chicago, and so I was on the mezzanine on the 2nd floor, and he said, "Can I walk down to the taxi with you?" And I said, "Well, sure you can." I'll never forget, he had a long Indian name. I couldn't tell you what it was now, but he said, "Just call me Ralph." And he gave me a business card that had his name on one side, and on the other side it just said Ralph on it. He said, "Everybody here calls me Ralph." And so we went down the escalators to the bottom floor, and we walked out to the taxi, and I'll never forget, I was getting ready to get in the taxi, and he took me by the arm, and he said, "I have to tell you something." He said, "I don't know why I was supposed to meet you, but," he said, "I know that we're going to do something very important together." Well, about a year later, he calls me, and Kevin, "Hey, Ralph," and he said, "I just wanted you to know that my book was just named the top children's book, just won the award for the top children's book in the world," the one that he gave to me. And he said, "I don't know what we're supposed to do together, but we're still supposed to do something." And he calls me about once a year to this day. It says, "I don't know what it is, but we're going to do something." So if any of y'all have been told to come meet me today, we'll just talk afterwards, and you and Ralph and I will get together. I used to be a player in the Methodist world. I was on the board of discipleship. I was conference communications director for one of the conferences. I served did all kinds of things. And I left, and you don't have to know why I left, but I developed some technology that got really big in the 90s. And it took me out into the corporate world where I was asked to speak at hundreds of conferences a year. And I've been doing that. And about a couple or 3 years ago, I really wanted to get back into the church world again. That's when I started Market Square Books, and you've seen our books out here all week. And so I was really tickled to death when they asked me to come here and speak today. I speak to corporations a lot at their conferences about how to communicate effectively. And I think there's so much that we can learn from the business world and the church about how to communicate to effectively help grow our congregation. So I'm only going to talk to you about a few things today. None of it's complicated. Some of y'all may know, I don't know if you know it all, about 2 weeks ago I was interviewed by the Washington Post, and they did a story, the interview, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago today. And what they wanted to talk to me about was some predictions I had made in the business world that had come true, and they wanted to talk to me about why so much that I write about actually happens. And I said, it's not rocket science. If you just pay attention, it's just common sense. Everything, and I think that's the way communications in the church is. It's not rocket science. It's really not. If we sit back and think about it, this is just stuff you've thought about a lot. But now you can go back and say, somebody in the front of a room said that these are some good ideas. So let me talk to you about a few things. Let's talk about some numbers, okay? These numbers will not surprise you at all. In the mid-1970s, close to 30% of Americans belonged to a mainline Protestant church. After decades of membership loss, only 10% say that they attend a mainline Protestant church today. Now that doesn't surprise anybody in here. In 2012, Delta Airlines was ranked as the lowest among customers of all major U.S. airlines. So what's that, 7 years ago? By 2015, they were the highest ranked major airline among customers in the United States. So here's my question. What changed? What changed from 2012 to 2015 that made them go from the bottom to the top? I made international news about that many years ago when I was on 5 Delta flights in a row that didn't get to the city they were supposed to go to. 5 in a row. And because of that crazy thing called Facebook, remember that? Now it's Instagram. But because of that crazy thing called Facebook, it became big news around the world. And I got a phone call from the CEO of Delta Airlines, Richard Anderson, and he said, you have to come see me. That's true. He said, I've got 200 newspapers on my desk, all with stories about how you can't get anywhere on Delta Airlines. So I got to know the good folks at Delta, and this wasn't because of anything I did, but I did start working with them on some of their customer service areas because they had some big issues. Now, let me tell you how this relates to the church. Here's something that Richard Anderson said to me. He was the CEO of Delta at the time. I think he's the CEO of Amtrak last time I checked. We were spending all this money to get new customers in the front door, and all the while we were losing our current customers out the back door. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound like any of our churches? He and I talked about this a lot. I did a lot of work with them. And we talked about this a lot. They were spending a fortune on television advertising and magazine advertising and newspaper advertising, trying to get new people in their doors. The problem was all their customers were always really mad at them because flights were getting canceled and things weren't happening, and they were leaving the company faster than they could get new customers. Here's a statistic that you've heard before. 20 to 1. 20 to 1. In the business world, it's a statistic we talk about a lot. It takes 20 times the effort to recruit a new customer as it does to keep an existing customer. So let's think about this in the world of the church. It takes 20 times the effort to recruit a new customer as it does to keep an existing customer. Now, when we start thinking about churches that are shrinking in size and numbers that are shrinking, what's going on? We're losing members, right? People say they're worried because we're losing younger members or whatever it is. We're losing members. It's not so much that we're not recruiting new members. It's just what Delta Airlines dealt with, losing old members. So I want to talk to you about that. That's one of the things I want to talk about a little bit today. So when we think about communicating in the church, let's think about communicating with 3 distinct groups. People who currently attend the church. People who attend less than twice a month. And people who used to attend church. Now, you could also throw in potential new members. I guess you could say 4 groups. I do have 4. I thought I said 3. 4 distinct groups. People who currently attend the church, people who attend less than twice a month, people who used to attend the church, and potential new members. I want to talk to you about some of the years I spent as a consultant to the business world. And I'd also often have corporations and associations who would hire me. My potential customers fit into 4 basic categories. One was my regulars. MFCP was a group that I have keynoted their convention. This year will be the 18th year in a row. 18 years in a row I've keynoted this convention for this group, MFCP. They are my regulars. Second group, groups that use me now and then. New York Press Association, about every other year they hire me to keynote their convention. Okay? They use me every now and then. They're not an annual customer like MFCP, but I count on them. I count on them every couple of years to show up and to use me for something. Third category, people who used to hire me. There are all these big groups out there when I used to speak all the time that would hire me to speak at their conventions and their events, but I haven't heard from them in a while. But they're still on my radar. They're still on my radar. Minnesota's on my radar. I haven't spoken for them in about 3 years, but they could come back. And then finally, potential new clients. Potential new clients. Let me ask you a question. I want you all to talk to each other for a minute. We may have to wake up for just a second here, okay? You're awake. I'm just teasing with you. Nobody even looks asleep out there right now, okay? Let me ask you a question. When it comes to keeping myself in business, I've owned a consulting business for 25 years now. I started it when I was 4. Yeah. When it comes to keeping myself in business, which group should I spend most of my resources communicating with? Talk amongst yourselves for just a second at your table. I'll give you about 15 seconds.
They tell people they have a bad experience. So I feel like, I don't know.
Okay, by show of hands, listen, did everybody come up with something? Everybody come up with something? By show of hands, how many said my regulars? How many said my regulars? Wow, just almost everybody. Groups that use me now and then. Okay, oh, well, a good number of you said that. People who used to hire me. Okay, got a couple who say that. Potential new clients. Okay, 2 or 3 that say that. As a consultant, as a pretty well-known major consultant, I want to stay in business. It's how I make, believe it or not, I don't make a living selling books. Maybe someday, okay? But as a consultant, I want to make sure that I stay in business. I've been in business 25 years. I'd like to stay in business a little while longer. So let's talk about some of the people I communicate with. I do communicate with potential new clients, okay? I do communicate. I send things out to new clients, email blasts. We print things, printed materials, phone calls, those kind of things. I also stay in touch with people who used to hire me because I'd like for them to hire me again. I'd like for them to hire me again. And the groups that use me now and then, I stay in touch with them because I hope that they'll continue to use me every other year or so. As long as I got enough of them, I'm okay. But the group I spend my most time and resources communicating with, my regular clients. You all got it back there, right? She didn't give her $20. $20. Okay. There you go. Now, I'm not saying the other groups aren't important. I'm not saying that at all. But if I want to remain in business, if I want my business to remain vibrant, I want to make sure that my regulars are taken care of. I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And so I spend the most energy, the most time, the most resources communicating with them, and I do it in lots of ways. Okay? But it's important to keep the lines of communication open to all of these groups. People who currently attend my church. People who attend less than twice a month. People who used to attend the church. And potential new members. Now, I want you to spend 30 seconds, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds talking with each other again. And here's what I'd like for you to do in that 30 seconds, okay? I'd like for you to share with each other, come up with 1 or 2 or 3 things that you all do at your various churches that you do to stay in communication with people who regularly attend the church. Take 30 seconds and do that. Okay, now take a few seconds, take 15, 20 seconds, and talk about how you communicate with people who attend the church less than twice a month. What do you do to stay in touch with them? Okay. What do you do to stay in communication with people who used to attend the church? Who used to attend the church?
I mean, it'll show.
And what do you do to stay in communication with potential new members? Potential new members.
Yeah. And one that you sent in mail. Yeah.
Okay, let's get together again. Somebody just share, just shout out something. What's something you do to stay in touch with people who regularly attend the church?
Bulletin.
Okay, somebody said bulletin, right?
Email.
You do emails? What do you email?
The bulletin and the announcement.
Okay. Newsletter? Okay, what kind of newsletter is it?
Constant contact.
I mean, so it's online?
Yeah.
It's online, okay. What else? Yeah. Facebook? Okay. Yeah, we're on number 1 still. People who currently attend the church. Verbal announcements. Okay, verbal announcements because they're there, right? You got a captive audience. How about people who attend less than twice a month? How do they hear from you? Same things, newsletters, emails. Somebody said Facebook. Yeah.
We started kind of paying attention to who wasn't around.
Yeah.
And assigned people to give them a phone call or a text. Like, haven't seen you in a couple weeks.
Okay. What a great idea. Okay, so if they're not around for 2 or 3 weeks, somebody contacts them. Okay. Yeah.
We contact them and ask if they'd like to have communion brought to them.
Okay. An excuse to call them, right? My Sunday school class, I teach a big Sunday school class. If they miss 2 or 3 weeks, somebody gets a hold of them. Tell them we're going to kick them out. No, we don't. Well, we tell them that, but we don't really kick them out. How about people who used to attend the church? What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
People who used to attend the church but no longer attended. How do you stay in touch with them? Friends. You know what I hear people talk about all the time, and this is for another session, not ours, but I hear people talk about all the time, well, they left the church, so I guess they're going to another church. No, most people who leave the church, they go somewhere, but not to another church, okay? So.
I don't think we communicate with them. We hear about them from people who are still in church who are connected, but we're not communicating.
Okay, at least at your church you're not, and that may be true of everybody, right?
Like official.
Official church. How about potential new members? How are we communicating with them? Website. Just you have a website? Okay. Okay.
Text in church.
Facebook. Somebody said. What's that?
Text in church, which
Te-
is
Tell us about that.
it's a church tool that if you get a first-time visitor,
Mm-hmm.
they can text a single word prompt
Mm-hmm.
and get connected. And for 6 weeks, an automatic generated system will text them and email them once a week saying,
Okay.
"We'd love to have you back. How you doing? This is what's happening in our church."
Okay.
And we'll automatically promote your next event that's coming up.
Great. Great. Anybody have any ways that they're communicating with people who haven't even been to the church? Some said websites. Yeah.
We have a lit screen out in front of the church
Uh-huh.
that invites people and tells them
Okay.
what's going on.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
Facebook Boost.
Sure. What's that?
Facebook Boost.
Facebook. Okay. Facebook Boost.
Door to
Okay.
door.
Door to. Do y'all do that?
Well, if we have a special event coming up.
No, that's great. I was just surprised. It sounds good. It says it. What a great idea. Door to door. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody should have thought of that before. That's a
right?
that's a great. No, that's a great idea, isn't it? That's a great idea. I heard somebody say something about a sign in front of the church. You know, in front of my church we have a sign, and you know it's just where somebody changes the letters every week. You know, but they don't put a stupid message up. They always put something. And it's amazing the number of people who just walk into our church and say, "I drive by that sign every day. I drive by that sign every day." You know. People who currently attend the church, people who attend less than twice a month, people who used to attend the church, potential new members. You know, before I started the book company, I was spending all my time trying to get new clients. I'd think about all those things, and I'd find ways to communicate with all those groups. And I think it's important to us as a church to see how can we reach out to all of those groups. We talked about this already. It's so crucial that we keep the people we've got. It's so crucial that we keep the people we've got. And that allows us to do the rest of these things. So my job in the business world is to keep my present customers and then go out and find new customers. Let's talk, yeah,
Just a quick question.
sure.
Have you ever taken the time to find and conversate with those who are no longer clients to find out why?
Yeah, all the time, all the time.
Because that's an awful, sometimes it's a little jaded or a little sided one way or another, but it's usually an interesting conversation.
It's a great conversation, and I do that in the church world too. You know, my Sunday school class is probably the size of a lot of small churches, 50 or so people, you know, each weekend. And I'll contact people when they've disappeared. You know, just what happened? Everything okay? Quite often it brings them back, as you probably know, and sometimes not. Not always, but sometimes it does. Let's talk about different methods of communication, okay? What works well with each different type of group? We talked about different things, which are all good things that people shouted out about things that they're doing at their church. Let's talk about what works well with different groups. Online communication, websites are a good tool for seekers. A lot of people, when they're looking for a church, when they've moved to an area and they're looking for a church, the first place they'll go is online and start looking for. That's actually where most people start looking for churches if they're not from the area. So they're going to look for churches with websites. So they're going to see your churches are driving down the street, and they'll look for your website. And that website will influence whether they want to show up at your church or not. My daughter, my kids are now college age, and when she moved to college and she was looking for a church, she wanted to talk to me about, you know, what church she might attend. And so I said, well, you know, it's her decision, but what are you interested in and everything? I said, why don't you go to their websites, and most websites will tell you what that church believes. And she found a particular church that she got really excited about. And I said, well, why don't you look on the website and see if women can be involved in leadership in the church? And she found out they couldn't. So immediately she said, I'm not going to that church. So people will look at the website. So let them know about your church on the... What's that?
I always look at the staff page and see if there are any women
Oh, yeah.
outside of the Sunday school classroom.
I'll tell you a funny story. I used to own an advertising agency years ago when I was young. And big churches would hire us to do things for them. And I remember a huge Church of Christ hired us one time to do a big book about their church, a promotional piece. And when they had ministries with women, it said women are involved in many ways in ministry in our church. They cook meals, they watch the nursery, they all those things. I teased them about it a good bit when they came back in. Okay, so make sure that your website is effective. Make sure that your website, no matter how small or how big your church is, make sure that your website is effective. I just started looking up churches in my area that I know are healthy churches, growing churches, and this is a website for one of them, Concord United Methodist Church. And notice right when you go to their homepage, first-time visitor, okay? Connect. You want to see some sermons? Here you go. You want to watch a sermon live? Here's your live stream right here, okay? So anybody that comes to their website, and this is not a huge church, it's an average-sized church, okay? Anybody who comes to this website can probably find what they're looking for right here. So just make sure that on your website that potential members, that seekers can find what they're looking for right away. Social media is a good way to expand your market. Okay? Most people who are looking for a church probably won't look for you on social media, but it's a good way of staying in touch with your members and with people who have visited your church. Okay? It's a good way to expand your market. In most instances these days, most churches will still be using Facebook primarily for that, but just simply because they're not that familiar with Instagram or some of the other methods that are out there. But getting involved in social media, if you're not already, is a good way to expand your market. This is a church in Knoxville, and I just went up, I was preparing for this, and so I just went up to their Facebook page, and I could see a special series they were having with a retired bishop who was coming to speak. Things about services they had, all kinds of things on here. And if I'm someone who's looking for a church or hasn't been to the church for a while, I went to their Facebook page and I found all kinds of things I could get involved in. Yeah.
Kevin, could you speak, something that we've learned just from surveys and getting feedback is we were trained in communication to get the information out. Now it seems like we're being told to see the website as a personal conversation with the person visiting. So a lot of news, a lot of personal kind of a feel for it, so that you're drawing them into your church or your institution before they even walk in.
You took some of and thank you for doing that. You took some of what I was going to say from me. That's exactly right. I live in many of the businesses and corporations I work with now are related somehow to journalism and communication. And so one of the important things we do is always tell a story. Always tell a story. People want a story. They want to see somebody from the church. They want to hear from somebody about what's going on. So yeah, let's use our websites and our social media to do that. Sure it is. Sure it is. I'm sure it's a pretty church. Email is effective for promotions and last-minute announcements. Promotions and last-minute announcements. You're probably not going to get too many new members through email blasts, but it's effective for promotions and last-minute announcements. Now, there are a lot of different software tools you can use out there to send emails to a lot of people at one time, okay? MailChimp is one you hear about all the time. Constant Contact's one you hear about a lot. There are other ones. If you're a Mac user, I use Mac's Bulk Mailer. It's very, very good for Mac users, and I stay in touch with thousands of people for different reasons, and so it's the one I use. But these will allow you to send emails out with legitimate addresses that you've collected from your members and visitors and those kind of things, and you can send them out and it will actually send it to them personally rather than just getting a copied and pasted email like you usually might get. And so these are all good. Constant Contact's good. There's lots of them out there. These are the ones you hear about most often. Classes and sermons can be effectively broadcast online. I mentioned I teach a Sunday school class, and I love teaching that class. I've taught this class for 20 years. I started when I was 6. And it's got people from 23 to 88 in it. And I just got this crazy idea. I wasn't trying to recruit new members or anything. I just thought it'd be fun. Facebook didn't have a group called Sunday School. So I grabbed it. If you go to Facebook Sunday School, that's my Sunday school class. And we don't tell anybody who we are or where we're from or anything. People all over the world come to our Sunday school class every Sunday. But you know what's funny? People show up at our class all the time. They hunt us down and they say, I saw you on Facebook and I had to come to your class. okay? Just using Facebook Live. You've used it, right? There's nothing to it. You don't have to have any equipment. We take a phone and put it on a stand right there that's got a microphone connected to it, and that's all we use. That's all we use. Classes, sermons, other things that you do at your church. It's a great tool. A number of shut-ins watch our Sunday school class each week. Our members, when they're on vacation, send us notes all the time. We're at the beach. We're watching Sunday school right now. Keeping them connected, even when they're not away. And what amazes me is I can tell who comes to our class. It shows me a list of who came, who watched. The number of our former members who come every week and watch it online, a lot of them. Because we've had that class 20 years. We've probably had, in those years, 500 people or more in that class, over the years. And I just see a long list of them that show up every Sunday. So our class is still meaningful to them. For some reason, they're not showing up, but it's still meaningful to them. And they're watching it live on Facebook every week. So if I get a bunch of new people next Sunday, I'll know it's you guys, okay? Okay. What is interesting is how many from Africa. How many we get from Africa. A lot of people from Africa come to our Sunday school class every week. There's the class right there. Phil's my co-teacher. Phil and I teach it every week. And that's just a shot from our Facebook Live. I have a Diet Sunkist every Sunday because one of our members walked in 3 or 4 years ago with a Diet Sunkist in his hand. I said, did you bring enough for everybody? He brings me one every Sunday now. So I always have a Diet Sunkist. This is just one of the local churches in my town. I just went up to their website and I saw that they broadcast their service live on their website. Broadcast their service live on their website. If I'm new in a town, if I'm new in a community, even if I'm not and I'm looking for a church, being able to see a service online could be a good draw for me. Tells me what that church is about.
Do you have a recommendation on, do you think it's better for the whole like that to be seen, or more of a focus on the service, like for, say, like the pastor?
I don't really have a thought on that. I haven't really thought too much about that.
Okay.
I didn't know real empty, focus on the
No
Oh,
kidding.
yeah, exactly. I just didn't know if having the whole spectrum.
You should do this for a living. That's great.
I'm also going to just say my friend's church reports that most of the first-time visitors have been worshiping online for 3 or 4 months before they step in.
And a lot of that would have to do with how big your community is and everything and how connected people are and all that. But yeah.
What about the whole service, or or just maybe the sermon part and the scripture? Or?
I would think I'd be interested in the whole service if I was somebody looking at churches. I would think I would be. Now, when we do our Sunday school class, just so you know, we don't do the prayer time and that kind of thing because people say personal things in there for the class.
Yeah.
So it starts right when the lesson starts. It starts right when the lesson starts. Yeah. Did you all see the news? You saw the news about Upper Room, right? You probably saw it before I did. The fastest growing group of Upper Room devotional readers are millennials. Did you see that? Okay, hit the news the other day. Somebody sent it to me. Here's a quote. It's a gateway drug to discipleship. Upper Room is now sold in $1,500 general stores. The editors, most of the writers are millennials for Upper Room now. And so it's drawing a large millennial office. People are actually buying those printed things and reading them. It didn't surprise me. I do research all the time. One of the things I do is a lot of research. I do one of the reasons the Washington Post called me the other day had to do with some of the research I had done in the subject that they were writing about. But one of the things we know, if you do a lot of research into what people read is, you know that people who are in their college years and 20s primarily prefer to read things in print, not on the screen. They've had enough screens. I see an amen back there. They've had enough screens. They've grown up with screens, right? I was talking to an elementary school teacher the other day. She said, she knows I write a lot about this new research. She said, do you know that in elementary school we're teaching handwriting again on paper? It's big again. She said, paper's big again. The high schools in my area used to have all the textbooks on computer. No more. They found out the kids could read better from print, right? Print's back in. Print's back in. It's a good thing to remember. The digital stuff was fun. I was one of the developers of the digital age. That's how I kind of got well known way back when, okay? But it was fun. We had a good time with it. But print's getting popular again, so don't forget that. Don't forget that, okay? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Newsletters, perhaps your most effective method of external communication. Yeah.
Can you define what you mean by newsletter?
I'm going to right now. Good question. Will you go with me everywhere I go if I ever speak on this again?
No.
And do segues?
I just
No, let's talk about this for a minute. I've worked a lot with the Roman Catholic Church. Because of my role in the communications world, the Roman Catholic Church puts a lot of resources into communication. They have big staffs that do newspapers and magazines. Every diocese does. So about every other year, they invite me to the International Conference of Catholic Communicators. There's usually a few thousand of them there. And so I pay attention to what they do. A few years back, it's been about 4 years now, somebody noticed that several of the dioceses, some of you all have been Catholic and know plenty of Catholic people and that kind of thing. Dioceses put out a weekly newspaper. You get a weekly newspaper if you're Roman Catholic, okay? And it has advertisements in it. It's like a full-blown newspaper. They've got staffs that sells ads. I've worked with them. They've got editors and writers and designers and the whole 9 yards. And the 100,000 people in their diocese get a copy of that each week. Well, a few years ago, a few of the dioceses decided that they could save money doing digital versions of it, right? Just send out by email or whatever. Well, the Pope got concerned. The Pope actually got word of it, got concerned, and declared we're going to do a major study, and they spent a lot of money on it. We're going to find out how this is affecting attendance in the Roman Catholic Church. So they did a major study. The results are over 100 pages. I've read every word of them. And they found out 4 major things. Now, I can't remember if I've got them on this or not, so let's look and see. They found out 4 major things. One, in dioceses where they had gone from a printed newspaper to a digital newspaper, there was a significant reduction in attendance in worship services. Okay? There was reduced financial giving in those churches. Reduced participation in mission events. Now, this is the one that surprised them but didn't surprise me at all because I do so much research among teenagers and college students, okay? There was reduced participation in youth events. So when this study came out, I went over to the University of Tennessee. I don't teach classes anymore, but I'm still a faculty member there. So I gathered a bunch of college students together, and I said, does this make sense to you? And they said, oh, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I said, why? And they said, if you send me an email about something, or send something, I don't look at it. Why would I look at it? We never get anything in the mail anymore. You send me something in the mail, I'm going to read every word of it. Okay? Well, that's what the Roman Catholic Church found. So the Pope ordered that all dioceses go back to printed newspapers because of all of these reasons. There's a reason that major advertisers put their money into TV and newspapers and magazines. We think they don't, but they do, because there's not a big payback on digital advertising. There's just not much payback on it. You spend more on it than you get back from it usually. Okay? It seems like a good idea, but it doesn't usually have a payback. Yeah?
What's the connection between digital newsletter and the reduction in attendance in worship?
All I know is that there is a connection. There's a correlation between the two. In the dioceses where they had done that, there had been those reductions. If you read the 100-page report, you could probably find all that out. I don't really remember at this point. But it was such a serious matter that the Roman Catholic Church went back to doing printed newspapers and magazines in each of their dioceses. So something to remember. Now, see, I talk about this with business groups. I say to them, okay, well, let's talk about another religious group. Intentional Growth Center. That's Southeast Jurisdiction. Some of you all know what that is. It's an official arm of the Southeastern Jurisdiction. It's located at Lake Junaluska. And they sponsor events for clergy and lay people. Their events had decreased significantly, and I was a member of their board, and I just mentioned this to them. I mentioned the Catholic study to them. This was a couple years ago. I mentioned Catholic because they had gone to doing all their promotional online. All the promotions were online, emails and those kind of things. And I just mentioned this to them. And I didn't even know, but the executive director at the next meeting said, after Kevin talked to us about that, we did an experiment, and we put, I forget how much money into it, but we started promoting our events with printed materials, mailing them out, and our attendance increased 30%. Just something to know. Just something to know. I've been director of a program at the University of Tennessee for 20 years that brings in journalists from around the world to classes. We send out printed materials like crazy because we find out that even though we send it out every way in the world, most people register because they got something in the mail. Most people register because they got something in the mail. Yeah?
Well, one of the things that some of our online readers said that they now get so many emails that if our newsletter disappears below the first screen that comes up, they never see them.
I don't know about you all, and I don't mean this, but I don't know about you all. I don't even deal in an email world anymore. In the business world, I do everything by text. Because I know that a third of the emails I send out will never get there. Some spam filter will catch them. Just emails don't get anywhere anymore so much. So I just don't even live in an email world anymore. Yeah.
What, the church I'm currently serving, they went from a print newsletter for everybody, mailing it out,
Mhm.
to mostly sending a link by email to let people know, as well as putting it on our Facebook page.
Mhm.
I think the church administrative assistant maybe copies 10 of them for people who don't have
Mhm.
any. And one of the reasons that they did that was there was the constant refrain, when it was said, well, I didn't know about that. What was in the newsletter?
Mhm.
Oh, I don't read the newsletter.
Mhm.
So there they were sending out material, and I don't know how many people that count. But,
Sure.
But I've heard that in other churches too. Oh, we don't read the newsletter.
Mhm.
So why, so they are wondering, maybe not so much why do we bother putting one out, but if we're going to put one out,
Mhm.
why waste the paper?
I understand why churches quit doing it. I mean, I understand why they quit doing it, but statistically, research shows that you're going to get the drop from doing that. Yeah.
Do you have any like best practices for printed material like newsletters, like newsletters that are tons of words? And
Believe me, I do, and that's a whole nother workshop. But let me mention a couple of things, okay?
difference between like
Let me mention a couple of things. My Sunday school class is an anomaly. We grow constantly with people of all ages, okay? Now, I think some of it's because we do really solid theology, teach really good class, but I think a lot of it's because of our communication. We put out two-sided pieces that go out every couple of months, okay? Each side has a story about one person in our class, okay? We just go talk to them. They tell us about their lives. And then down there somewhere, what the next book we're going to study will be mentioned down there, something like that. But it's all personal. It's all information like you would be getting a magazine or something, reading about someone. Now, don't get me wrong. I think if you're going to do a church newsletter, you should have things about things that are coming up in the church and that kind of thing. I would have a note from the pastor in there. I know none of us like writing them, but I know you do. Let's go to a class and learn how to write. But
Writing another sermon.
I dated a Methodist pastor for a while. If I had to write one more sermon for her, no, I said for a while. I don't do it anymore. But seriously, I would have a lot of personal stuff in there. Not a lot of stuff that nobody wants to read. If I did have a pastor's column, it would be very brief. It would just be very brief, paragraph or two. Just staying in touch with people is what we're doing. That pastor column comes in handy, not as much with the members maybe, but maybe with the members. But again, these people that we're sending that newsletter to that we're hoping will be interested in our church, and they want connection points. They like stories about people in the church. They like to know who the pastor is. They like to know a little bit about what the pastor thinks. Yeah.
The church I just arrived at last year, they use their newsletter to publish the minutes of all of their meetings.
That had to be interesting.
Oh,
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was lovely reading.
Yeah.
I have a logistical question though.
Yeah.
And it might just be a dumb question, but I have to ask it. Like, how are people getting the newsletter in the hands of potential people? Because ours goes to the mailing list.
Uh-huh.
They've already been there.
Yep.
And most first-time visitors aren't giving you their data. And unless you're handing them out, like, how are people who aren't already connected to your church?
Let me tell you how we have a lot of luck with our Sunday school class. Okay, again, we've had hundreds of people in that class over the years. Most of them are not connected in any way now because over 20 years people come and go and that kind of thing. We actually get together and have meetings, groups of people do and say, okay, who should these things go to? Who used to be here that's not here anymore? Who are people we know that don't have a church that we can send them to? We sometimes send them out in a zip code around the church. Things like that. We find all kinds of ways to get these things in the hands of people. Zip code mailing's very inexpensive in the business world. We do it all the time. We buy it.
Doing some bulk mailing.
Yeah,
not just-
well, in that class, if you say bulk, we might send out a couple hundred. We might send out a couple hundred, not like thousands of them or anything like that. Anybody, it's not going to hurt to get it out to anybody. But his question was very good. What do you put in it? What do you put in the newsletter? Don't think of the old-fashioned newsletter you got on a mimeograph when you were a kid, but don't think you have to spend a fortune on it anyway. Have some information about members of the church, members of the class, things that are going on, things that people would be interested in. Maybe not the minutes of every meeting you had at the church. Okay, that'd be great for the website. You know, have a little link up there, minutes of everything we've done in the church. Is that right? Yeah. Why are newsletters, printed mailings important? As people get less printed materials, they draw more attention. I don't know about you guys, I get hardly anything in the mail anymore. I used to get junk mail all the time. I hardly get anything in the mail anymore. Studies show printed advertising to be far more effective than other types of advertising. Dollar for dollar, you get more back from printed advertising than you do from any other type of advertising. They remind members that the church is still there. That's one thing newsletters are so good about, is you've got all these people who rarely attend the church, who haven't attended the church in a long time, and that regular piece of mail reminds them that the church is still there. Tom, my mother's been passed on for about 4 years now, but I'll never forget something she said to me 2 or 3 times in her later years. I never hear from the church unless they want money. She'd get a financial. You always send out the stewardship stuff, don't you, in the mail, right? Because you want a return on it.
I weed through the people that aren't around.
Yeah, but you know, that I always get that's the only thing I get in the mail from my church, other than my Sunday school stuff, is the stewardship thing. You know, a quarterly statement saying how much I gave, and then the stuff in September saying how much they want me to give. You know, and people notice that. My mom noticed it. Most age groups are far more likely to notice material received in the mail than sent via social media or email. Don't get me wrong, we should be doing the other stuff too. Don't get me wrong. Let's take advantage of every area we have. We need to grow our churches. We really do. And if it works for the business world, I don't see why we can't use it for our churches. Let's talk about one other area. Here you go. Include life stories about church members with pictures. Put a close-up of them. Feature classes and group in the church with stories. Tell stories. Not every class, every newsletter, but pick a class and tell what they're doing, or a group, the UMW or whoever. Here's what they're up to. Include a brief message from the pastor. Include a church calendar for the week. I do focus groups all the time in the media world. And sometimes magazines and newspapers hire me to do focus groups in their cities. And one of the things that always comes out is people want a calendar on the front page. They want to know what's going on in my town today or this week on the front page. Mail them in print and get the marketing benefit. Podcasts. Podcasts are incredibly popular. If you're younger, you know that podcasts are incredibly popular these days. People listen to them daily. My kids listen to regular podcasts all the time. I listen to some podcasts. I do some podcasts. I found some statistics from orangeblogs.org, which specializes in podcast media for churches. And here are some things that are important when you're starting a podcast. One is decide what it is that you're going to share on your podcast. Are you going to include sermons? Are you going to have conversations with members? You don't have to do all these things. Decide what you're going to do with your regular podcast. Maybe you're going to send out your sermons. Maybe you're going to interview members at the church. I think that would be very effective in a regular weekly podcast where you just have a nice discussion with someone in the church. Whether you're going to include news and announcements. For the younger world, and even for some of us that aren't in the younger world, podcast is a primary method for getting information. And it's incredibly easy to do. So why not use them? Whatever you choose, keep your podcast consistent so listeners know what to expect. If it's going to be weekly, make it weekly. If it's going to be once a month or once a week or once a day or whatever it's going to be, keep it consistent so they know when to look for it. Now, here are a few tips. You can Google podcasts and find out how to do it. There's nothing to it. There's nothing to do a podcast, okay? Find the right tools. If you own a Mac, there's a lot of Mac users in the world these days. You and I are one of them. I see a lot of Macs. You can use GarageBand to record your episodes. So you've already got the software on your computer to do it. You can use a standard headphone with a mic if you want to. I have a little $20 microphone that works great that just sits in the middle of a table that I use, okay? Once you record your episode, you can upload it to your site. They don't have to be long. They can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But it's really easy to record them and to upload it to the site. Just find a high school student in the church or the college student that can help with that. And there are lots of good hosts out there. You'll need a host for your podcast. There are a lot of free ones. There are a lot of paid ones. So just do a Google search for best podcast host and look at all your options. There'll be a lot there. Or there are a lot of audio people I've noticed at this conference running cameras and sound and that kind of thing. Talk to them, ask them. I'm certainly not an expert in this. I do it, but I'm not an expert. Ask them, where's a good place for me to go to host my podcast? And then when you do your podcast, they'll just automatically show up in the right place, and people who want to listen to them will know where to find them, and they can automatically show up on their phones or wherever so they can listen to them when they come out. Be yourself. If you're going to do a podcast, don't try to be a professional announcer, okay? Just get in front of the microphone and talk as you always would. And with a podcast, always leave a call to action. Always leave a call to action. We talk about it in the churches and sermons and that kind of thing. In the business world, we talk about that in advertising. Every ad should have a call to action. Invite your listeners to do something with what they've heard. It might be to check out your church. It might be to look at the website. It might simply be to invite them back to listen again next week to the podcast. But always invite your audience back for something else.
If you like our podcast, give us a gift.
Oh, you already got your gift today. There you go. And be consistent. Nothing frustrates listeners more than a scheduled podcast that doesn't happen. Okay? So if you can't do it more than once a week, then just make it a weekly podcast. Make it a weekly 5-minute podcast or 10-minute podcast, but keep it consistent with whatever you do. I want to talk about one other thing, and then we're out of time. We're about out of time. I want to talk about focus groups and how you can use them in your church. One of the things I've written about and done a lot in the last 3 or 4 years is focus groups. And matter of fact, I'll be in North Dakota in October, and a foundation up there is paying to bring millennials in from all over to attend this focus group I'm going to lead, okay? But I often do focus groups in small towns where they bring people from the town in together, and we do focus groups for one reason or another. In the church, we can use focus groups for a lot of things. They can work just as well in a church as they can work in a business environment. Let's be honest, it's sometimes hard, not always, but it's sometimes hard to get things done at a board meeting or a committee meeting or something like that. But with focus groups, it's a whole different world, okay? And here's a focus group I did in a little town in Tennessee last year, and it made national news because this publisher, this small newspaper in Tennessee, said, we found out our subscribers have dropped 20% in a year, and we don't know what to do. And said, we need to get you down here to do. I said, no, you don't need me. I said, you do a focus group. Find out why you've lost your subscribers. And so she got together a focus group made of high school students, college students, millennials, people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, people who read their paper, people who didn't read their paper. I said, find about 18 of them and have a focus group with them, and it turned their newspaper around. That kind of thing can turn our church around if used effectively. So let's talk about what we do with the focus group. First, if it's easy for me to say, but if I were at a church, leading a church, I would have a focus group at least annually, or maybe in the business world, I tell businesses to have a focus group at least once a year, but twice a year if you can. Twice a year if you can. Once a year is fine if you can't.
Same people?
Nope, that's what we're going to talk about right now, okay? It could be some of the same people. There's no reason it couldn't be. It should be made up of all types of church members and non-members. So how do we get non-members to come to focus group? Focus group's not going to be a big group. At your church, it might be 6 people, okay? And it might be that you contact people who used to attend the church. It might be that you have people in the church who have friends that don't attend the church. You get them to find people to be on it. But find members and non-members to be a part of the focus group. Every time I go to a town to do a focus group, one of the things they'll always ask me is, well, how in the world will we get people to be a part of it? And I always say, you really won't have any trouble. If you start asking people, they'll do it. Buy them a free lunch. And that's what I say to them. Tell them they're going to get a free lunch out of it.
If you compensate focus group participants, does it jaundice the results?
I've never compensated, so I don't know. I've never had to. I don't know. But usually a free lunch will do it. In the South, if it's fried chicken or something, everybody will show up. So we do that. No, I'll say, tell them that you're going to give them fried chicken for lunch, and people will show up if you're in the South. With focus groups, you want to divide the groups into groups of 3 or 4. So you always want to have at least 2 groups because you might get someone that dominates the discussion and excuse the whole thing. So try to get a couple of groups together. They might have 3 people or 4 people in each group. And what I normally do is I normally create a questionnaire that I give to each group and let them discuss it on their own. I don't lead it. I give them the questionnaire, and I ask them everything I want to know of them about the church. So just dream big. What is it I would like to know if I could find out anything from these people? And I'm going over this quickly because we're out of time. But the most important thing that I remind people with focus groups all the time is, the most important thing about a focus group is you have to act on what you learn. Otherwise, it's a total waste of time. You're going to get some ideas if you do focus groups. You're going to get some ideas about things people like, things they don't like, things they like about the service, things they don't like about the service, things they like about the newsletter, things they don't like about the newsletter, all kinds of things. Act on what you learn. People still try to hire me as a consultant, and I just don't do much of it anymore. But they'll call me and want to hire me, and one of the first things I'll usually say to them is, have you had a focus group on this subject? You know, you want to hire me to come in and help you with this. Have you gotten a focus group together on it? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, well, if you hire me, I'm just going to come in and create a focus group. So just do it without me. And it's usually not a hard thing for them to do. I'll help them figure out what questions they should ask and that kind of thing. But it's not a hard thing to do.
So is the focus groups that you've been using mostly just answering questions on paper?
Mm-hmm. And then I have them do them on their own on paper, and then we discuss them as a group. So when I go to North Dakota to speak with this big millennial group in October, we've already set the schedule. They're going to pay for these millennials to come in. There's a foundation that's doing it. I'm going to meet with them all morning and divide them up into focus groups. I'm going to give them questionnaires that they're going to complete, that we're going to go to lunch, they're going to come back, we're going to discuss what they talked about in their groups. Then, about an hour at the end of the day, they're bringing in publishers from all over the Midwest to meet with them. And we're going to talk about, because the whole focus of these focus groups is to find out what can be done to get millennials to read news. What happens, whatever news is, what can be done to get millennials to be more interested in news? Maybe the answer is nothing. We don't know. We haven't had the focus groups yet. But then at the end of the day, we're bringing in all these publishers, and I'm going to explain to them what the focus groups did, what they talked about, what they came up with, and then there'll be a conversation between the two.
So you have the people break up into groups, they fill out the questionnaire, you engage them in conversation, and how do you compile the subjective nature of the conversation? Do you record it? Do you stenographer?
The conversation is not the big part. What you get from the groups themselves is that's the meat of what I'm wanting. When they fill out their questionnaires, that's what I want. What did they talk about in their small groups? I've got that in writing on their questionnaires. That's what I use from focus groups. I really just have them converse at the end just because it lets them, people like to kind of verbally talk about what they did in their groups. So we always do that. But the real meat is what we get on those questionnaires. And the questionnaires are usually, I don't know how long yours will be. The ones I use are usually 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long. And give the same questionnaire to each group. And just have them fill it out, come back with the answers, and then have a conversation about it.
The paperwork as a group.
That's right, as a small group. So you might have 2 small groups of 3 or 4 people each. 3 or 4 people each. It just depends on how long the questionnaire is and that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll have a couple different questionnaires for them. I'll have them fill out one, and I've made a different one for some reason about something else and do that. You probably wouldn't spend more than an hour on the whole process, though.
So you give one sheet of paper to one?
Well, it's more than one sheet of paper, one questionnaire, which might be several pages. And each table would have their own questionnaire with the same. Yeah, they're not interacting with each other, just the tables fill out their own. And that way, if you do have somebody that's skewing the conversation, you'll have more than one set of results to use. That's why I always divide them up into small groups. Gang, I believe we are about out of time. Remember to keep these people in mind when you think about your church communications. People who currently attend the church, people who attend less than twice a month, people who used to attend the church, and potential new members. Gang, I'd keep you here and we talk about questions and stuff, but time is up, and I know some of y'all want to go home. Is this Saturday afternoon? I'm just going to mention this. I've written a bunch of books in my life. The best one is The Good Folks of Lenox Valley, and we're almost out of them out there. Hey, yeah, you're on chapter 19, right?
I'm laid out by the pool and all afternoon.
About a young female Methodist minister who's appointed to be the first female pastor in her hometown, in her town. I didn't write, I wrote part of this. Where do we go from here? That's the best-selling book in all of Methodism. I even beat Adam Hamilton this year, in all of Methodism this year. And it's where I got 24 leaders in the church to write about where we go from here. That's been number one for about 2 months now. And another one that I headed up was Understanding Your Call. And we should have given it a different name because people always think it's about clergy. It's actually about how we all have a call, and it looks at 11 biblical people and how they understood their calls. Thanks for coming on a Saturday afternoon. I really do appreciate it.